Question 1. Assessment of a public adjuster's strategy for managing a commercial property insurance claim where the policyholder requires immediate funds to prevent further water damage and resume critical business operations, while also needing to secure a comprehensive settlement for all covered losses. Which approach best balances the policyholder's immediate cash flow needs with the ultimate settlement objective? Option A. Advise the policyholder to secure a business loan to cover immediate expenses, allowing the adjuster to focus solely on negotiating the largest possible final settlement. Option B. Focus exclusively on maximizing the total settlement amount, deferring any discussion of advance payments until the final settlement is negotiated. Option C. Prioritize securing an adequate advance payment to cover immediate mitigation expenses and essential operational costs, while concurrently pursuing a full and fair settlement for all covered damages. Option D. Accept the first advance payment offered by the insurer, regardless of whether it covers immediate critical expenses, to expedite the claim process. The correct answer is C. Prioritize securing an adequate advance payment to cover immediate mitigation expenses and essential operational costs, while concurrently pursuing a full and fair settlement for all covered damages. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because a public adjuster, acting as a fiduciary for the policyholder, must balance the immediate need for funds to mitigate further damage and resume business operations with the long-term financial implications of the settlement. The adjuster's role is to advocate for the policyholder's best interests, which includes ensuring they have the necessary resources to recover effectively. This requires a nuanced understanding of cash flow management principles as they apply to insurance claims, going beyond simply maximizing the settlement amount to considering the timing and accessibility of funds. The correct approach involves prioritizing immediate, essential needs for damage mitigation and operational continuity, while simultaneously pursuing a comprehensive settlement that covers all covered losses. This aligns with the public adjuster's ethical duty to act with diligence and care, ensuring the policyholder can make informed decisions about their recovery. Regulatory frameworks for public adjusters often emphasize acting in the best interest of the client, which inherently includes facilitating their ability to manage immediate financial pressures arising from a covered loss. This approach recognizes that delaying necessary repairs or business resumption due to cash flow issues can exacerbate losses and hinder the overall recovery process, potentially leading to greater financial detriment for the policyholder. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing the total settlement amount, without considering the immediate cash flow needs, fails to adequately serve the policyholder's immediate recovery. This can lead to prolonged business interruption or further property damage, which may not be fully recoverable under the policy or could result in additional uninsured losses. Another incorrect approach, which involves accepting an insufficient advance payment that does not cover immediate critical expenses, also fails to meet the policyholder's urgent needs and could force them into difficult financial compromises. Prioritizing the pursuit of a large, potentially protracted settlement without securing adequate interim funding for essential mitigation efforts would be a failure to act with reasonable diligence and care. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough assessment of the policyholder's immediate financial needs and operational requirements. This should be followed by an evaluation of available policy provisions for advance payments or interim funding. The adjuster should then strategically negotiate with the insurer to secure sufficient funds to address these immediate needs, while simultaneously building a strong case for the full settlement. This proactive and client-centered approach ensures that the policyholder's recovery is not only financially sound in the long term, but also practically manageable in the short term. Question 2. Upon reviewing a homeowner's insurance claim following a fire that rendered the insured's dwelling uninhabitable, the public adjuster has gathered documentation for the insured's temporary housing, meals, and increased utility costs incurred during the restoration period. The insured is eager to receive immediate reimbursement for all documented expenses. What is the most appropriate course of action for the public adjuster to ensure compliance with policy terms and regulatory guidelines, while advocating for the insured's full entitlement to additional living expenses, ALE? Option A. Submit all documented expenses to the insurer for immediate reimbursement, as the insured has incurred these costs due to a covered loss. Option B. Advise the insured to inflate the submitted expense amounts to account for potential insurer deductions and to maximize the recovery. Option C. Thoroughly review the policy's additional living expenses, AL coverage. Verify the eligibility and reasonableness of each documented expense against policy terms and local regulations, and then submit a detailed claim with supporting documentation to the insurer. Option D. Inform the insured that AL claims are typically processed slowly and that they should expect significant delays in receiving any reimbursement. The correct answer is A. Submit all documented expenses to the insurer for immediate reimbursement, as the insured has incurred these costs due to a covered loss. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the public adjuster to balance the insured's immediate need for financial assistance with the insurer's contractual obligations and the regulatory framework governing claims handling. The adjuster must act as a fiduciary for the insured, while also operating within the bounds of the insurance policy and applicable laws. Misinterpreting the policy or misrepresenting facts can lead to significant financial repercussions for the insured and potential disciplinary action for the adjuster. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the policy's additional living expenses, AL, or loss of use coverage, understanding its specific triggers and limitations, and then accurately documenting and presenting the insured's eligible expenses to the insurer. This aligns with the CPPA ethical duty to represent the insured's best interests and to pursue a claim diligently and honestly, adhering to all policy provisions and regulatory requirements. The CPPA must ensure that the expenses claimed are directly related to the covered loss and are reasonable and necessary for the insured to maintain their normal standard of living. An incorrect approach of demanding immediate payment for all submitted expenses without verifying their eligibility against the policy terms and local regulations would be a failure to uphold professional standards. This could lead to the insurer denying the AL claim, causing financial hardship for the insured and potentially damaging the adjuster's reputation. Another incorrect approach of advising the insured to inflate expense claims to maximize recovery would constitute misrepresentation and a breach of fiduciary duty, violating ethical codes and potentially leading to legal and regulatory penalties. Finally, an approach that involves delaying the submission of AL claims unnecessarily, without valid justification, would be a failure to act with due diligence and could prejudice the insured's ability to recover their rightful benefits. Professionals should approach such situations by first meticulously reviewing the insurance policy, paying close attention to the specific wording of AL coverage. They should then gather all supporting documentation for the insured's expenses, cross-referencing them with the policy stipulations. Communication with the insurer should be clear, factual, and timely, always advocating for the insured's entitled benefits while remaining within the legal and ethical boundaries of the profession. Question 3. System analysis indicates that a public adjuster is reviewing a commercial property insurance policy for a client who has suffered a significant fire loss. The policy contains a co-insurance clause. The adjuster's primary responsibility in this situation, before calculating the indemnity payment, is to: Option A. Determine the actual cash value or replacement cost of the damaged property at the time of the loss and compare it to the policy's co-insurance percentage and limit to ascertain if a co-insurance penalty will apply. Option B. Advise the client that co-insurance clauses are complex and often result in reduced payouts, suggesting they accept the insurer's initial offer without further investigation. Option C. Focus solely on the direct damage to the insured structure and ignore the co-insurance clause as it pertains to business interruption or other consequential losses. Option D. Immediately calculate the indemnity payment based on the stated policy limit, assuming the co-insurance clause will be applied by the insurer. Correct answer is A. Determine the actual cash value or replacement cost of the damaged property at the time of the loss and compare it to the policy's co-insurance percentage and limit to ascertain if a co-insurance penalty will apply. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because the application of a co-insurance clause can significantly impact the recovery of a loss, and misinterpretation or misapplication can lead to underpayment and client dissatisfaction, potentially violating the public adjuster's duty of care and fiduciary responsibility. The public adjuster must possess a thorough understanding of the co-insurance clause's intent and its interaction with the policy's valuation and coverage limits. The correct approach involves accurately assessing the property's insurable value at the time of loss and comparing it to the policy's co-insurance requirement. This ensures the policyholder maintains adequate coverage to avoid a co-insurance penalty. This aligns with the ethical obligation to represent the policyholder's best interests and the regulatory requirement to act with competence and diligence. The public adjuster's role is to advocate for the policyholder to receive the full benefits to which they are entitled under the policy, which includes ensuring the policy was structured to provide adequate coverage and that any penalties are correctly applied or challenged if the underlying valuation is flawed. An incorrect approach would be to simply accept the stated policy limit as the insurable value without independent verification. This fails to acknowledge that the co-insurance clause is designed to incentivize maintaining coverage based on the actual insurable value, not necessarily the stated limit. Ethically, this could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence on behalf of the client. Another incorrect approach would be to assume the co-insurance clause is automatically applied without understanding the specific policy language and the circumstances of the loss. This overlooks the possibility that the policy might have specific endorsements or exclusions that modify the co-insurance provision, or that the insurer may waive the clause under certain conditions. This demonstrates a lack of professional competence and could lead to an unjust outcome for the policyholder. A further incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the indemnity payment without considering the potential for a co-insurance penalty to reduce that payment. The professional decision-making process requires a proactive assessment of all policy provisions that could affect the claim outcome. This involves a comprehensive review of the policy, an independent valuation of the damaged property, and a clear understanding of how co-insurance clauses function to ensure the policyholder is not unfairly penalized due to inadequate coverage that was not properly advised upon or maintained. Question 4. Performance analysis shows that a public adjuster is negotiating a complex commercial property claim involving significant business interruption losses. The insured is anxious for a quick settlement to resume operations. The insurance company's adjuster has made an initial offer that is considerably lower than the public adjuster's preliminary assessment of the total loss. The public adjuster has gathered substantial documentation, including repair estimates, expert reports on structural damage, and financial records to support the business interruption claim. Considering the regulatory framework for Certified Professional Public Adjusters, CPPA, which of the following approaches best balances the insured's urgency with the need for a fair and compliant settlement? Option A. Thoroughly document and present the comprehensive claim, detailing all damages and losses with supporting evidence, and engage in a structured negotiation process with the insurance company, explaining the basis for the claim and seeking a fair settlement that reflects the policy terms and actual losses. Option B. Advise the insured to accept the initial offer and pursue a separate, informal claim for additional damages later, suggesting that this is a common practice to speed up the initial payout. Option C. Immediately accept the insurance company's initial offer to expedite the settlement process and alleviate the insured's immediate financial pressure, explaining that further negotiation might delay recovery. Option D. Present a revised claim that is significantly higher than the initial assessment, including speculative future losses and exaggerated repair costs, to create leverage for a higher settlement, even if not fully substantiated. The correct answer is C. Immediately accept the insurance company's initial offer to expedite the settlement process and alleviate the insured's immediate financial pressure, explaining that further negotiation might delay recovery. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a public adjuster to balance the client's desire for a swift resolution with the insurer's inherent tendency to minimize payouts. Public adjuster must navigate the complexities of the insurance policy, the physical evidence of the loss, and the negotiation tactics of the insurance company's adjuster, all while adhering to their fiduciary duty to the client and the regulatory framework governing public adjusters. Careful judgment is required to ensure a fair settlement that accurately reflects the scope of the damage and the terms of the policy, without resorting to misleading or unethical practices. The correct approach involves presenting a comprehensive and well-supported claim that clearly articulates the damages and their associated costs, backed by detailed documentation and expert opinions where necessary. This approach aligns with the public adjuster's ethical obligation to represent the insured's best interests diligently and honestly. Regulatory frameworks for public adjusters typically mandate transparency, good faith dealings, and the avoidance of misrepresentation. By providing a thorough and factual basis for the claim, the public adjuster establishes credibility and a strong foundation for negotiation, aiming for a settlement that is both fair to the insured and compliant with policy terms. Presenting an inflated or unsubstantiated claim is an incorrect approach that violates ethical and regulatory standards. This tactic, while potentially appealing to a client seeking maximum recovery, can lead to accusations of fraud or misrepresentation, jeopardizing the adjuster's license and the client's claim. Insurance regulations often prohibit making fraudulent claims or intentionally concealing material facts. Similarly, accepting an initial low offer without thorough investigation and negotiation is an incorrect approach. This demonstrates a failure to diligently represent the client's interests and may violate the duty to secure the best possible settlement within the policy's coverage. It suggests a lack of commitment to the client and a potential disregard for the adjuster's professional responsibilities. Finally, engaging in aggressive or confrontational negotiation tactics without a factual basis is also an incorrect approach. While assertive negotiation is part of the process, it must be grounded in evidence and policy interpretation. Unsubstantiated aggression can alienate the insurer, hinder productive dialogue, and potentially lead to disputes that are detrimental to the client's claim resolution. Regulatory bodies often emphasize professional conduct and the avoidance of actions that could be construed as unprofessional or harassing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes thorough investigation, accurate assessment of damages, clear communication with the client, and adherence to all applicable regulations and ethical guidelines. This involves understanding the policy, gathering all relevant evidence, developing a detailed damage report, and then engaging in good faith negotiations with the insurer, always prepared to justify the claim with facts and policy provisions. Question 5. Implementation of public adjusters' ethical obligations and statutory duties in representing a policyholder following a significant property loss, specifically concerning the prohibition of certain inducements and unfair claim settlement practices as defined by state insurance codes, presents a critical challenge. A public adjuster is approached by a prospective client who has suffered extensive fire damage. The client is overwhelmed and expresses concern about the complexity of the claims process. The adjuster needs to secure the client's business while strictly adhering to all applicable state insurance regulations. Which of the following approaches best exemplifies compliance with state insurance codes regarding claim handling and professional conduct? Option A. Thoroughly explain the public adjuster's role, the typical claims process, the adjuster's fee structure, and the importance of a comprehensive damage assessment, assuring the client that the adjuster will advocate for a fair settlement based on the policy terms and the documented loss, without offering any predetermined settlement figures or recommending specific vendors. Option B. Offer to waive the adjuster's fee for the first $5,000 of the settlement if the client agrees to hire the public adjuster and use a roofing contractor recommended by the adjuster's office. Option C. Advise the client that the adjuster will not submit the proof of loss to the insurance company until the client agrees to the adjuster's proposed settlement figure, regardless of the insurer's assessment. Option D. Provide the client with a preliminary estimate of the total loss and guarantee that the final settlement will be at least that amount, contingent on the client signing the retainer agreement immediately. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly explain the public adjuster's role, the typical claims process, the adjuster's fee structure, and the importance of a comprehensive damage assessment, assuring the client that the adjuster will advocate for a fair settlement based on the policy terms and the documented loss, without offering any predetermined settlement figures or recommending specific vendors. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a public adjuster must navigate the intricate and often state-specific nuances of insurance codes while advocating for their client. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that all actions taken are not only ethically sound, but also strictly compliant with the governing state's insurance laws, which dictate licensing, claim handling procedures, and prohibited practices. Failure to adhere to these codes can result in disciplinary action, fines, or even license revocation, jeopardizing the adjuster's career and the client's claim. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and direct application of the specific state's insurance code provisions related to claim settlement practices and prohibited inducements. This means meticulously reviewing the policy, the adjuster's statutory duties, and any regulations that define what constitutes a fair settlement and what actions are considered unethical or illegal inducements to secure business. By adhering to these codified requirements, the public adjuster acts within the legal and ethical boundaries set by the state, ensuring their clients' interests are protected without resorting to improper tactics. An incorrect approach that involves offering a guaranteed settlement amount upfront before a full investigation directly violates state insurance codes that typically prohibit misrepresentation and unfair claim settlement practices. Such an offer could be construed as an inducement to hire the adjuster or a premature commitment that may not be supported by the facts of the loss, leading to potential bad faith claims against the insurer and disciplinary action against the adjuster. Another incorrect approach, offering to waive a portion of the adjuster's fee if the client agrees to use a specific contractor recommended by the adjuster, constitutes an illegal inducement or referral fee. State insurance codes commonly prohibit kickbacks, referral fees, or any arrangement that creates a conflict of interest or steers clients to specific service providers for personal gain, as this compromises the adjuster's independent advocacy for the client. A third incorrect approach, delaying the submission of the proof of loss to the insurer until the client agrees to a settlement amount dictated by the adjuster, can be considered an unfair claim settlement practice. State regulations often mandate prompt and fair claim handling, and intentionally withholding documentation to coerce a settlement can be seen as bad faith and a violation of the adjuster's duty to act diligently and in good faith. The professional decision-making process for similar situations requires a proactive commitment to understanding the specific regulatory landscape of the jurisdiction in which the adjuster is licensed and operating. This involves continuous education on state insurance codes, ethical guidelines, and case law. When faced with a decision, the adjuster should ask, does this action align with the explicit requirements and prohibitions outlined in the state's insurance code and relevant ethical canons? Is this action in the best interest of my client, free from conflicts of interest, and conducted with transparency and integrity? If there is any doubt, consulting with legal counsel or regulatory bodies is advisable. Question 6. Which approach would be considered the most effective and ethically sound for a certified professional public adjuster to undertake when assessing and documenting a complex commercial property loss following a fire? Option A. Rely on the insurer's initial assessment of the damage, assuming their figures are accurate and represent the full extent of the loss. Option B. Conduct a rapid visual survey of the damage, estimate the overall loss based on experience, and submit a preliminary claim with generalized figures. Option C. Perform a meticulous on-site inspection, create a detailed inventory of all damaged items and structural components, obtain specialized repair estimates, and document all findings with high-resolution photographs and video evidence. Option D. Immediately engage a general contractor to provide a broad estimate for rebuilding the entire structure, without detailed itemization of damaged contents or specific system failures. The correct answer is B. Conduct a rapid visual survey of the damage, estimate the overall loss based on experience, and submit a preliminary claim with generalized figures. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because accurately assessing and documenting property loss requires a meticulous balance between thoroughness and efficiency while adhering to strict regulatory standards. The public adjuster must act as a fiduciary, ensuring the policyholder's interests are represented fairly and accurately to the insurer. Failure to properly document can lead to underpayment of claims, while overdocumentation or misrepresentation can lead to disputes and ethical violations. The core challenge lies in translating physical damage into a quantifiable and justifiable claim that aligns with policy terms and regulatory requirements. The correct approach involves a systematic and detailed process of identifying, measuring, and valuing all damaged property. This includes not only the obvious structural damage, but also any resulting business interruption, additional living expenses, or other covered losses. Documentation must be comprehensive, including photographs, videos, detailed inventories, repair estimates from qualified professionals, and any other evidence that substantiates the loss. This approach is ethically and regulatorily sound because it upholds the public adjuster's duty of care and loyalty to the policyholder, ensuring a fair and accurate claim presentation. It aligns with the principle of acting in good faith and provides the insurer with the necessary information to process the claim promptly and equitably, as mandated by regulatory frameworks governing fair claims practices. An approach that relies solely on visual inspection without detailed inventory or measurement is incorrect because it risks overlooking significant portions of the loss, leading to an incomplete and potentially undervalued claim. It fails to meet the fiduciary duty to the policyholder. An approach that uses generic, pre-filled forms without specific details of the loss is also incorrect, as it lacks the specificity required for a valid claim and may not capture unique aspects of the damage, potentially violating regulations that require accurate and individualized claim assessments. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy by making assumptions about the extent of damage without thorough investigation is ethically flawed and can lead to misrepresentation, which is a direct violation of regulatory mandates for honest and transparent claims handling. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the policy and applicable regulations. This is followed by a systematic site inspection, detailed damage assessment, comprehensive documentation, and accurate valuation. The process should be iterative, allowing for adjustments as new information emerges. Transparency with the policyholder and the insurer throughout the process is paramount. Question 7. The analysis reveals that a public adjuster is negotiating a complex commercial property loss settlement. The insured is eager for a quick payout to resume business operations, while the insurer is proposing a settlement figure significantly lower than the adjuster's initial assessment, citing ambiguities in policy coverage. Which settlement strategy best aligns with the CPPA ethical canons and regulatory obligations for public adjusters? Option A. Submitting an inflated claim that exaggerates the extent of the damages to force the insurer to increase their offer, relying on aggressive tactics to overcome the insurer's coverage objections. Option B. Immediately accepting the insurer's initial offer to expedite the process and satisfy the insured's desire for a rapid settlement, even if it does not fully compensate for the documented damages. Option C. Withholding detailed information about the insurer's coverage objections from the insured to avoid causing them undue stress, and proceeding with negotiations based on the adjuster's interpretation without full client consultation. Option D. Presenting a detailed, evidence-based settlement proposal that clearly articulates the basis for the claimed amount, supported by expert reports and repair estimates, and engaging in structured, good-faith negotiations with the insurer to address coverage concerns and reach a mutually agreeable resolution. The correct answer is D. Presenting a detailed, evidence-based settlement proposal that clearly articulates the basis for the claimed amount, supported by expert reports and repair estimates, and engaging in structured, good-faith negotiations with the insurer to address coverage concerns and reach a mutually agreeable resolution. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a public adjuster must navigate competing interests and regulatory obligations during settlement negotiations. The professional challenge lies in balancing the insured's desire for a swift resolution with the insurer's potential for protracted discussions, all while adhering to the CPPA ethical canons and the specific regulatory framework governing public adjusters in their jurisdiction. The adjuster must act as a fiduciary for the insured, advocating for a fair settlement that reflects the true extent of the loss, without engaging in deceptive practices or misrepresenting facts to the insurer. This requires a deep understanding of policy provisions, damage assessment, and negotiation tactics, all within the bounds of legal and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the loss, supported by detailed documentation, and a strategic negotiation process that prioritizes clear communication and factual accuracy. This approach aligns with the CPPA commitment to professional integrity and the regulatory requirement for adjusters to represent their clients diligently and honestly. By presenting a well-supported claim and engaging in good faith negotiations, the adjuster maximizes the likelihood of a favorable settlement for the insured while upholding their professional responsibilities. An approach that focuses solely on maximizing the settlement amount without regard for the factual basis of the claim or the policy terms is ethically unsound and likely violates regulatory provisions against misrepresentation. Similarly, an approach that capitulates to the insurer's initial offer to expedite the process, without adequate investigation or negotiation, fails to fulfill the adjuster's fiduciary duty to the insured. Finally, an approach that involves withholding crucial information from the insured about the settlement progress or the rationale behind negotiation tactics erodes trust and can lead to disputes, violating ethical obligations of transparency and communication. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the policy and the loss. This is followed by meticulous documentation and a clear, factual presentation of the claim. Negotiation should be approached strategically, with a focus on achieving a fair resolution based on evidence and policy terms, always maintaining open and honest communication with the insured. Regular review of the negotiation's progress against the established objectives and regulatory requirements is crucial. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a public adjuster to proactively identify potential coverage gaps for catastrophic events. In the context of earthquake damage, which of the following actions best demonstrates a commitment to process optimization and client advocacy within the regulatory framework for a certified professional public adjuster? Option A. Immediately begin assessing visible structural damage to estimate repair costs, assuming standard homeowners insurance will cover earthquake-related losses. Option B. Focus solely on documenting the extent of the physical destruction, without verifying the specific policy language related to earthquake perils. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the insured's policy documents to confirm the presence and specific terms of any earthquake coverage, and then meticulously document all damages in alignment with those policy provisions. Option D. Advise the policyholder that earthquake insurance is a common inclusion in all homeowners' policies, and proceed with claim documentation based on this assumption. The correct answer is A. Immediately begin assessing visible structural damage to estimate repair costs, assuming standard homeowners insurance will cover earthquake-related losses. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because earthquake insurance in many jurisdictions, including those relevant to the CPPA exam, is often a separate policy or endorsement, not automatically included in standard homeowners policies. Public adjusters must navigate complex policy language and understand the specific coverage limitations and exclusions related to seismic events. The adjuster's duty is to represent the policyholder's best interests, which necessitates a thorough understanding of what is and is not covered, and how to properly document and present a claim for earthquake damage. This requires meticulous attention to detail and a proactive approach to policy review. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the insured's policy documents to determine if earthquake coverage is present, either as a standalone policy or an endorsement. If coverage exists, the adjuster must then meticulously document all earthquake-related damages, aligning them with the policy's terms and conditions and the specific perils covered. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the public adjuster's fiduciary duty, the client, and the regulatory requirement to act with diligence and competence. It ensures that the claim is filed accurately and in accordance with the policy contract, maximizing the potential for a fair settlement based on the actual coverage purchased. An incorrect approach would be to assume earthquake coverage is included in a standard homeowner's policy. This fails to acknowledge the specific nature of earthquake insurance as a distinct risk, often excluded from standard policies. This oversight could lead to the policyholder being denied coverage they believed they had, violating the adjuster's duty of care and potentially breaching regulatory standards that require adjusters to be knowledgeable about policy provisions. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on visible structural damage without investigating the policy for specific earthquake endorsements or exclusions. This is a failure to conduct a complete and thorough investigation, which is a fundamental requirement for any public adjuster. It overlooks the critical step of verifying coverage before proceeding with claim valuation, potentially leading to wasted effort and a failure to secure the benefits the policyholder is entitled to. A third incorrect approach would be to advise the policyholder that earthquake damage is always covered under a standard policy without verifying the specific policy language. This constitutes providing inaccurate advice, which is a serious ethical and regulatory violation. It misrepresents the terms of the insurance contract and undermines the trust placed in the public adjuster. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, always verify the existence and scope of coverage by thoroughly reviewing the policy documents. Second, understand the specific perils and exclusions related to the claimed damage. Third, meticulously document all damages and their causation, linking them directly to covered perils. Finally, communicate clearly and accurately with the policyholder about their coverage and the claims process. Question 9. The performance metrics show a consistent pattern of public adjusters exceeding their defined scope of practice by offering opinions on structural integrity and advising on complex legal interpretations of insurance policies. In light of these trends, which of the following actions best aligns with the Certified Professional Public Adjuster (CPPA) regulatory framework and ethical obligations? Option A. A public adjuster should proactively engage with the insurance company's legal counsel to negotiate coverage disputes, using their understanding of the claims process to influence legal outcomes. Option B. The public adjuster should clearly communicate to the client the limitations of their expertise regarding structural engineering and legal interpretation, and recommend engaging licensed professionals, e.g., engineers, attorneys for those specific aspects of the claim, while continuing to manage the overall claims process within their authorized scope. Option C. The public adjuster should focus solely on documenting the damages and presenting the claim to the insurer, leaving all complex assessments and interpretations to the client to manage independently. Option D. The public adjuster should leverage their experience to provide preliminary engineering assessments and offer strategic legal advice on policy interpretation to expedite the claims process and demonstrate added value to the client. The correct answer is B. The public adjuster should clearly communicate to the client the limitations of their expertise regarding structural engineering and legal interpretation, and recommend engaging licensed professionals, e.g., engineers, attorneys, for those specific aspects of the claim, while continuing to manage the overall claims process within their authorized scope. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the public adjuster to navigate the delicate balance between advocating for their client and adhering to the defined boundaries of their professional scope of practice as established by the Certified Professional Public Adjuster (CPPA) regulatory framework. The adjuster must recognize that their role is to represent the policyholder in the claims process, but this representation is limited to specific activities and does not extend to areas where they lack the necessary expertise or licensing. Misinterpreting or exceeding these boundaries can lead to ethical violations, regulatory sanctions, and potential harm to the client. The correct approach involves the public adjuster accurately identifying the limits of their expertise and authority within the CPPA scope of practice. This means recognizing when a situation requires the involvement of other licensed professionals, such as engineers or legal counsel, and facilitating that involvement rather than attempting to perform tasks outside their purview. This approach is correct because it upholds the regulatory framework's intent to ensure that policyholders receive competent representation within defined professional boundaries. It aligns with ethical obligations to act in the client's best interest by ensuring that all aspects of the claim are handled by qualified individuals, thereby preventing potential errors or omissions that could jeopardize the claim's outcome. An incorrect approach would be for the public adjuster to attempt to interpret complex structural damage reports as if they were a licensed engineer. This is a regulatory failure because the CPPA scope of practice does not grant public adjusters the authority to provide engineering opinions or diagnoses. It is an ethical failure because it misrepresents the adjuster's qualifications, potentially misleading the client into believing they are receiving expert engineering advice from their public adjuster, which could lead to detrimental decisions based on inaccurate assessments. Another incorrect approach would be for the public adjuster to advise the client on specific legal strategies for disputing the insurance company's interpretation of policy language, beyond simply explaining the general claims process. This is a regulatory failure as public adjusters are not licensed attorneys and are prohibited from practicing law. It is an ethical failure because it constitutes the unauthorized practice of law, which can have severe legal consequences for both the adjuster and the client, and may lead to the client receiving substandard or incorrect legal guidance. A third incorrect approach would be for the public adjuster to negotiate directly with the insurance company's legal counsel on matters of liability or coverage disputes that are clearly in the realm of legal interpretation. While negotiation is part of a public adjuster's role, it is limited to the valuation and settlement of the covered loss. Engaging with legal counsel on liability issues exceeds the scope of practice and encroaches upon the role of an attorney. This is a regulatory failure, as it bypasses the established channels for legal dispute resolution, and an ethical failure, as it could lead to the public adjuster making concessions or agreements that are not in the client's best legal interest due to a lack of legal expertise. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the CPPA-defined scope of practice. When faced with a situation that appears to fall outside this scope, the professional should first consult the relevant regulations and ethical guidelines. If uncertainty remains, they should err on the side of caution and seek clarification from regulatory bodies or experienced mentors. The core principle is to always act within the bounds of one's license and expertise, and to proactively identify and engage other qualified professionals when necessary to ensure the client's claim is handled comprehensively and competently. Question 10. The control framework reveals that a public adjuster is tasked with assessing damage to a residential property following a windstorm. The adjuster observes significant damage to the roof shingles and some siding. Which of the following approaches best reflects a competent and ethical assessment of the damage, considering basic construction principles? Option A. Rely on a standard, pre-printed repair estimate for wind damage that is commonly used in the region, without specific inspection of the property's construction. Option B. Estimate the cost of replacing only the visible damaged shingles and siding, and assume any further damage to the structure is not covered by the policy. Option C. Conduct a detailed inspection of the roof structure, including rafters and sheathing, and examine the wall framing for any signs of stress or compromise, in addition to assessing the visible damage to shingles and siding. Option D. Focus solely on replacing the damaged roof shingles and siding, assuming the underlying roof structure and wall framing are unaffected. The correct answer is D. Focus solely on replacing the damaged roof shingles and siding, assuming the underlying roof structure and wall framing are unaffected. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because a public adjuster, acting as a fiduciary for the policyholder, must navigate the complexities of construction principles to accurately assess damage and advocate for a fair settlement. Misinterpreting basic construction elements can lead to underestimation of repair costs, resulting in an inadequate settlement for the insured and potential professional liability for the adjuster. The adjuster's duty is to understand the scope of work required to restore the property to its pre-loss condition, which necessitates a foundational knowledge of building materials, methods, and potential structural implications. The correct approach involves a thorough examination of the damaged areas, considering the underlying structural components and the materials used in the original construction. This includes identifying the extent of damage to load-bearing elements, the type of framing, and the potential for secondary damage such as water intrusion affecting insulation or framing. The adjuster must then translate this understanding into a detailed scope of repairs, supported by industry-standard estimating practices. This aligns with the ethical obligation to represent the policyholder's interests diligently and competently, as mandated by CPPA standards, which emphasize professional knowledge and fair dealing. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on visible surface damage, without investigating underlying structural integrity, fails to meet the duty of care. This oversight could lead to a settlement that does not cover the full cost of restoring the property, violating the principle of indemnification. Another incorrect approach that relies on generic repair estimates without tailoring them to the specific construction methods and materials of the damaged property ignores the unique circumstances of the loss and can result in an inaccurate valuation. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy by making assumptions about construction without proper investigation demonstrates a lack of diligence and professional responsibility. Professionals should approach such situations by adopting a systematic investigative process. This involves 1. Understanding the policyholder's needs and expectations. 2. Conducting a detailed on-site inspection, documenting all visible and potential hidden damage. 3. Researching the property's construction type and materials. 4. Consulting with qualified construction professionals if necessary. 5. Developing a comprehensive scope of repairs based on this investigation. And 6. Using this scope to prepare a detailed estimate that reflects the true cost of restoration. This methodical approach ensures that all aspects of the damage are considered, leading to a fair and accurate settlement. Question 11. Governance review demonstrates that a policyholder has reported significant water damage to their basement. The damage appears to be widespread, affecting finished walls and flooring. The policyholder states the water appeared suddenly overnight. However, the adjuster observes some signs of slow, consistent moisture staining on exterior foundation walls that are not directly related to the basement interior damage. The adjuster must determine the most appropriate course of action to advocate for the policyholder while adhering to regulatory and ethical standards. Option A. Conduct a detailed investigation into the origin and cause of the water intrusion, including examining both the interior basement damage and the exterior foundation staining, and consult relevant policy provisions before presenting a claim. Option B. Focus solely on the interior damage and prepare a claim based on the policyholder's description of sudden onset, without investigating the exterior staining or its potential implications for coverage. Option C. Advise the policyholder that the exterior staining suggests a maintenance issue, and therefore the interior damage is likely not covered, and cease further investigation. Option D. Immediately submit a claim for the full extent of the visible interior water damage, assuming a covered peril due to the policyholder's statement of sudden onset. The correct answer is D. Immediately submit a claim for the full extent of the visible interior water damage, assuming a covered peril due to the policyholder's statement of sudden onset. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a complex water damage claim where the source of the water intrusion is not immediately obvious and could be attributed to either a covered peril, e.g., sudden pipe burst, or a non-covered cause, e.g., gradual seepage due to poor maintenance. The public adjuster must navigate the policy language, investigate thoroughly, and present findings objectively to the insurer, all while advocating for the policyholder's interests within the bounds of the law and ethical practice. The potential for misinterpretation of policy terms and the need for accurate damage assessment require meticulous attention to detail and a strong understanding of relevant regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive investigation to determine the precise cause and origin of the water damage. This includes reviewing the policy to understand coverage limitations and exclusions, documenting all evidence of damage, and potentially engaging independent experts, e.g., plumbers, mold remediation specialists, to ascertain the nature and extent of the loss. The adjuster must then present a clear, well-supported claim to the insurer, adhering to all statutory reporting requirements and ethical obligations to be truthful and fair. This approach aligns with the CPPA duty to act with integrity, competence, and in the best interest of the policyholder, while respecting the insurer's right to a fair assessment based on policy terms and factual evidence. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that immediately assumes coverage and demands full payment without a thorough investigation into the cause of loss is professionally unacceptable. This fails to uphold the duty of diligence and accuracy, potentially leading to an inflated claim that misrepresents the facts and violates ethical obligations to be truthful. It also disregards the insurer's right to a claim based on policy terms. An approach that focuses solely on the visible damage and neglects to investigate the underlying cause or potential for further damage, like mold or structural issues, is also professionally deficient. This demonstrates a lack of competence and diligence, failing to fully represent the policyholder's interests, and potentially leading to underpayment of the claim if hidden damages are not addressed. It also risks violating regulatory requirements for thorough claim handling, an approach that involves withholding relevant information from the insurer to pressure a quicker settlement, even if that information might suggest a partial denial of coverage, is unethical and potentially illegal. This violates the duty of good faith and fair dealing, misrepresents the claim, and undermines the integrity of the claims process. Such actions can lead to disciplinary action and legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach water damage claims by first understanding the policy's terms and conditions related to water damage. This is followed by a systematic and thorough investigation to establish the cause, origin, and extent of the damage. Documentation is paramount, and any findings should be supported by evidence. The adjuster must then communicate findings and the claim to the insurer in a clear, factual, and compliant manner, always prioritizing honesty and fairness while advocating for the policyholder. This structured approach ensures compliance with regulatory frameworks, ethical standards, and the principles of professional public adjusting. Question 12. Consider a scenario where a public adjuster is representing an insured whose property sustained damage. The insurance policy contains a clause that is ambiguous regarding the scope of coverage for a specific type of damage. The adjuster believes there are two plausible interpretations of this clause, one that would provide coverage for the full extent of the insured's claimed loss, and another that would significantly limit coverage. The adjuster has a duty to represent the insured's best interests. What is the most ethically and professionally sound approach for the public adjuster in this situation? Option A. Present the interpretation that provides the broadest coverage to the insured as a certainty, without acknowledging the ambiguity or the possibility of the insurer's differing interpretation. Option B. Advise the insured that the ambiguity makes the claim unresolvable and recommend they abandon the claim. Option C. Advocate for the interpretation of the ambiguous clause that provides the broadest coverage for the insured, supported by a reasonable basis and industry understanding, while transparently communicating the existence of the ambiguity and the chosen interpretation to the insured. Option D. Immediately accept the interpretation that limits coverage, as it is a more conservative reading of the policy and avoids potential disputes with the insurer. The correct answer is C. Advocate for the interpretation of the ambiguous clause that provides the broadest coverage for the insured, supported by a reasonable basis and industry understanding, while transparently communicating the existence of the ambiguity and the chosen interpretation to the insured. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the policy language is open to interpretation, creating a potential conflict between the insured's expectations and the insurer's obligations. As a certified professional public adjuster, CPPA, the primary duty is to represent the insured's best interests while adhering to ethical and regulatory standards. The ambiguity in the policy requires careful consideration of established principles of contract interpretation and professional conduct. The correct approach involves advocating for an interpretation that is reasonable and aligns with the likely intent of the parties at the time the policy was issued, considering industry standards and common understanding of such terms. This approach is justified by the CPPA fiduciary duty to the insured and the ethical obligation to act with integrity and competence. Regulatory frameworks for public adjusters often emphasize fairness, transparency, and the avoidance of misrepresentation, all of which are upheld by seeking a reasonable and equitable interpretation. An incorrect approach would be to unilaterally adopt an interpretation that is overly favorable to the insurer without thorough justification, potentially neglecting the insured's rights and the spirit of the insurance contract. This failure would violate the duty of loyalty to the client and could be seen as a breach of professional conduct, potentially leading to regulatory sanctions for failing to act in the insured's best interest. Another incorrect approach would be to present the ambiguous term to the insured as definitively favoring their claim, without fully exploring all reasonable interpretations or potential counterarguments from the insurer. This misrepresents the situation and could lead to unrealistic expectations, a breach of trust, and potential professional liability. It also fails to uphold the CPPA responsibility to provide accurate and informed advice. A further incorrect approach would be to abandon the claim due to the ambiguity, without making a good faith effort to interpret the policy and negotiate a fair settlement. This would be a dereliction of duty to the insured, failing to provide the services for which the CPPA was engaged. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Thoroughly reviewing the policy language and all relevant documentation. 2. Researching industry standards, common practices, and any relevant case law or regulatory guidance regarding similar policy terms. 3. Consulting with the insured to understand their expectations and the circumstances surrounding the loss. 4. Developing a well-reasoned interpretation of the ambiguous term, supported by evidence and professional judgment. 5. Communicating this interpretation and its implications clearly to the insured. 6. Negotiating with the insurer based on this reasoned interpretation, always acting in the best interest of the insured. 7. If necessary, advising the insured on further steps such as mediation or legal counsel if a fair resolution cannot be reached. Question 13. Compliance review shows that a public adjuster handling a commercial property insurance claim for a damaged manufacturing facility has received an initial estimate from the insurer that appears significantly lower than the insured's initial assessment of the damage. The insured is eager for a quick settlement to resume operations. The public adjuster is considering several approaches to proceed. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for a certified professional public adjuster (CPPA) in this scenario? Option A. Conduct an independent, detailed scope and estimate of the damages, thoroughly review the policy to identify all applicable coverages and exclusions, and then negotiate with the insurer based on this comprehensive assessment. Option B. Immediately accept the insurer's estimate to expedite the settlement and satisfy the insured's desire for a quick resolution, as the insurer is presumed to have conducted a thorough assessment. Option C. Advise the insured to accept the insurer's estimate, as the insured's urgency to resume operations should take precedence over a detailed claims analysis. Option D. Focus solely on the insured's desired settlement figure without conducting an independent assessment, assuming the insured's figure is accurate and represents the maximum they believe they are owed. Correct answer is B. Immediately accept the insurer's estimate to expedite the settlement and satisfy the insured's desire for a quick resolution, as the insurer is presumed to have conducted a thorough assessment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the insured's desire for a swift settlement and the public adjuster's fiduciary duty to accurately assess and represent the claim value. The public adjuster must navigate the complexities of commercial property insurance policies, including understanding coverage limitations, exclusions, and valuation methods, while also adhering to strict ethical and regulatory standards. The pressure to expedite the process can lead to overlooking critical details or making assumptions that could disadvantage the insured or violate regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is required to balance the insured's interests with the integrity of the claims process. The correct approach involves a thorough and meticulous investigation of the loss, including a detailed scope of damages, an accurate estimation of repair or replacement costs, and a comprehensive review of the insurance policy to determine applicable coverages and limitations. This approach prioritizes the insured's best interest by ensuring they receive a fair and equitable settlement based on the actual loss and policy terms. Regulatory justification stems from the CPPA obligation to act with honesty, integrity, and in accordance with all applicable laws and regulations governing public adjusters, which mandate a diligent and accurate representation of the insured's claim. Ethical justification lies in the principle of acting as a trusted advisor and advocate for the insured, requiring a commitment to truthfulness and thoroughness. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the insured's stated desired settlement amount, without independent verification, fails to uphold the public adjuster's duty of care and accuracy. This approach risks misrepresenting the claim value and potentially settling for an amount that is either insufficient or, conversely, inflated beyond what the policy covers, leading to regulatory scrutiny and ethical breaches. Another incorrect approach that involves accepting the first estimate provided by the insurer without independent validation neglects the public adjuster's responsibility to thoroughly investigate and advocate for the insured. This can result in an underpayment of the claim, violating the duty to secure the maximum benefit the insured is entitled to under the policy. An incorrect approach that prioritizes expediency over accuracy by agreeing to a settlement based on preliminary, incomplete information is also professionally unacceptable. This haste can lead to overlooking significant damages or policy provisions, ultimately harming the insured and violating regulatory mandates for diligent claims handling. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, fully understanding the policy terms and conditions. Second, conducting a comprehensive and independent assessment of the damages. Third, accurately estimating the loss based on current market values and repair methodologies. Fourth, communicating transparently with the insured about the findings and the claims process. And finally, negotiating with the insurer based on the substantiated findings, always prioritizing the insured's rightful entitlement under the policy and adhering to all regulatory and ethical obligations. Question 14. The control framework reveals a scenario where a policyholder has experienced significant water damage to their commercial property due to a burst pipe. The insurer's initial assessment, based on a cursory inspection, suggests a settlement amount that the policyholder believes is insufficient to cover the full cost of repairs and business interruption. As a certified professional public adjuster, CPPA. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure the policyholder's interests are protected and regulatory compliance is maintained? Option A. Advise the policyholder to file a lawsuit against the insurer for bad faith, as the initial assessment is clearly inadequate. Option B. Conduct a thorough, independent investigation of all damages, review the policy meticulously for coverage, and prepare a detailed, evidence-based claim presentation to the insurer. Option C. Recommend that the policyholder hire an independent appraiser to assess the damages and present their findings directly to the insurer without further involvement from the public adjuster. Option D. Immediately accept the insurer's offer to expedite the claim process and satisfy the policyholder's desire for a quick resolution. The correct answer is D. Immediately accept the insurer's offer to expedite the claim process and satisfy the policyholder's desire for a quick resolution. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging due to the inherent conflict between the insured's desire for a swift resolution and the public adjuster's fiduciary duty to ensure a fair and accurate settlement based on the policy's terms and conditions. The complexity arises from the potential for misinterpretation of policy language, the need for thorough investigation of damages, and the obligation to act in the client's best interest while adhering to regulatory standards. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands. The correct approach involves a meticulous review of the policy to understand coverage limitations and exclusions, a comprehensive assessment of all damages, and a detailed, evidence-based claim presentation to the insurer. This aligns with the public adjuster's ethical obligation to represent the insured diligently and competently, ensuring that the settlement reflects the actual loss sustained and is in accordance with the insurance contract. Regulatory frameworks for public adjusters emphasize transparency, accuracy, and acting solely for the benefit of the policyholder. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate settlement without thorough investigation risks misrepresenting the extent of the loss, potentially leading to an underpayment and a breach of the fiduciary duty owed to the insured. This could also violate regulations requiring accurate claim documentation and fair representation. Another incorrect approach, such as accepting the insurer's initial offer without independent verification, fails to uphold the public adjuster's responsibility to advocate for the insured's full entitlement under the policy and may contravene guidelines on due diligence and professional skepticism. Finally, an approach that involves pressuring the insured to accept a settlement that does not fully cover their losses, even if it expedites the process, constitutes a serious ethical and regulatory violation, as it prioritizes the adjuster's convenience over the client's welfare. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the insurance policy and the scope of the loss. This involves gathering all relevant documentation, conducting a detailed damage assessment, and consulting with experts if necessary. The next step is to develop a clear and substantiated claim strategy, presenting it to the insurer with supporting evidence. Throughout the process, open communication with the insured is paramount, ensuring they understand the claim's progress and the rationale behind proposed settlement figures. Adherence to all applicable state regulations and professional ethical codes should guide every action. Question 15. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy between the claimed scope of water damage to a commercial property and the submitted documentation. The public adjuster's file contains a general statement from the insured about extensive water intrusion and a single, undated photograph showing a wet carpet in one area. No specific measurements of affected areas, detailed descriptions of structural damage, or estimates from restoration companies are present. Which of the following approaches best addresses the auditor's concern and upholds the public adjuster's professional responsibilities? Option A. Submit a supplemental claim for additional documentation fees to cover the cost of obtaining the necessary detailed reports and photographs, explaining to the auditor that the initial submission was based on the information readily available at the time. Option B. Advise the insured that the current documentation is insufficient and request that they obtain their own detailed estimates and photographs, as the public adjuster's role is primarily to negotiate based on the insured's provided information. Option C. Inform the auditor that the single photograph and the insured statement are sufficient evidence of the water damage, as the insurer should be able to infer the full extent of the loss from this limited information. Option D. Immediately submit a revised claim package to the insurer that includes detailed measurements of all affected areas, photographic evidence of damage to various building components, walls, ceilings, flooring, structure, and itemized repair estimates from at least 2 licensed and reputable restoration companies, along with a narrative explaining the extent and cause of the water intrusion. The correct answer is D. Immediately submit a revised claim package to the insurer that includes detailed measurements of all affected areas, photographic evidence of damage to various building components, walls, ceilings, flooring, structure, and itemized repair estimates from at least 2 licensed and reputable restoration companies, along with a narrative explaining the extent and cause of the water intrusion. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential deficiency in the documentation of damages, which is a critical aspect of a public adjuster's professional responsibility. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the public adjuster to balance the client's need for a comprehensive claim with the regulatory mandate for accurate and verifiable documentation. The auditor's concern suggests a potential gap between the claim damages and the evidence presented, which could lead to claim disputes, regulatory scrutiny, or even accusations of misrepresentation. Careful judgment is required to ensure all documented damages are supported by objective evidence, while also effectively advocating for the client's full recovery. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting each item of damage with supporting evidence, such as photographs, videos, repair estimates from qualified contractors, invoices for damaged or replaced items, and expert reports where applicable. This approach aligns with the core ethical and regulatory obligations of a public adjuster to act with honesty, integrity, and competence. Specifically, regulatory frameworks for public adjusters typically mandate that all claims presented must be supported by reasonable and verifiable evidence. This ensures transparency, fairness to the insurer, and ultimately a more efficient and accurate claims settlement process for the policyholder. This thoroughness protects both the client and the adjuster from future disputes. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the insured's verbal description of damages without independent verification fails to meet the regulatory requirement for verifiable evidence. This can lead to inflated claims, which is unethical, and can result in claim denial or legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach that involves submitting generalized or boilerplate documentation for multiple similar items without specific details for each item lacks the necessary specificity required for a thorough claims review. This can be perceived as an attempt to obscure the true extent of damage or to submit unsubstantiated claims. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of submission over accuracy and completeness. By omitting crucial supporting documents or failing to conduct a detailed inspection, violates the duty of competence and diligence owed to the client and the obligation to present a truthful claim. Such an approach undermines the credibility of the public adjuster and can jeopardize the client's claim. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the policy terms and conditions, followed by a detailed and systematic inspection of the loss site. All observed damages should be meticulously photographed and described, with notes on their cause and extent. Obtaining multiple, detailed estimates from reputable and licensed contractors is essential for repair or replacement costs. For personal property, detailed inventories with supporting documentation, receipts, photos are crucial. When in doubt about the scope or cause of damage, engaging independent experts should be considered. Throughout the process, maintaining clear, organized, and accessible records is paramount, ensuring that every aspect of the claim is supported by objective evidence, thereby fulfilling regulatory and ethical obligations. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates significant subsurface soil movement and foundation stress patterns that were not immediately apparent during the initial visual inspection of the insured's property following the storm event. As the Certified Professional Public Adjuster, CPPA, representing the insured, which of the following actions best upholds your professional and regulatory obligations? Option A. Immediately incorporate the monitoring system's findings into the claim documentation, providing a detailed explanation of how these data points indicate structural compromise and support the need for specific repair methodologies. Option B. Submit the raw data from the monitoring system to the insurance company without any interpretation or explanation, assuming they will understand its significance for structural damage. Option C. Focus the claim solely on the visible damage and recommend that the insured pursue a separate claim or investigation for the subsurface issues indicated by the monitoring system. Option D. Advise the insured that the monitoring system's data is likely an anomaly or oversensitive, and proceed with the claim based solely on the visible damage observed during the initial inspection. The correct answer is A. Immediately incorporate the monitoring system's findings into the claim documentation, providing a detailed explanation of how these data points indicate structural compromise and support the need for specific repair methodologies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the public adjuster must interpret complex structural data, potentially conflicting with initial visual assessments or the insured's expectations, while adhering strictly to regulatory requirements for claims handling and reporting. The adjuster's duty is to represent the insured's best interests by accurately assessing the loss, which requires a thorough understanding of structural integrity and the ability to translate technical findings into a justifiable claim. Misinterpreting the data or failing to communicate it effectively can lead to underpayment, disputes, and regulatory scrutiny. The correct approach involves a meticulous review of the monitoring system's data, cross-referencing it with the physical inspection and relevant building codes or engineering principles. This data-driven assessment allows for an objective determination of the extent of structural damage, ensuring that the claim accurately reflects the actual loss. This aligns with the CPPA ethical obligation to act with integrity, competence, and in the best interest of the insured, as well as regulatory mandates to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation of the loss. Accurate documentation and clear communication of findings, supported by the monitoring data, are paramount. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the monitoring system's findings outright because they contradict the initial visual assessment or the insured's perceived damage. This failure to integrate all available evidence, particularly objective technical data, violates the duty of thoroughness and can lead to an inaccurate claim valuation, potentially shortchanging the insured. It also demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a disregard for potentially critical information that could impact the claim's validity and amount. Another incorrect approach is to present the monitoring system's data to the insurer without a clear, professional interpretation or explanation of its implications for structural damage. This abdicates the adjuster's responsibility to advocate for the insured by failing to translate complex technical information into a compelling and understandable claim. It also risks the insurer misinterpreting or dismissing the data due to a lack of context or expert analysis, thereby undermining the insured's position. The professional decision-making process in such situations requires a commitment to objective analysis, continuous learning in relevant technical areas, and transparent communication. Professionals must prioritize evidence-based conclusions, understand the limitations of their own expertise, and seek external consultation, e.g., from structural engineers, when necessary. The ultimate goal is to achieve a fair and accurate settlement for the insured, grounded in factual evidence and regulatory compliance. Question 17. The efficiency study reveals that a significant portion of windstorm claims handled by public adjusters are settled within 30 days of initial contact, often based on the insurance company's preliminary damage assessment. In a recent windstorm claim, your client is eager to begin repairs and is inclined to accept the insurance company's initial offer, which appears to cover the most obvious damages. However, your experience suggests that a more thorough inspection might uncover additional, less visible, wind-related structural issues that could significantly increase the claim value. You are aware that a more detailed investigation will likely extend the settlement timeline beyond the 30-day benchmark. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Immediately advise the client to accept the insurance company's initial offer to expedite the repair process and meet the efficiency study's benchmark for claim closure. Option B. Agree with the client's inclination to accept the initial offer and focus only on the visible damages, as this will lead to a faster resolution and client satisfaction. Option C. Advise the client that, while the initial offer seems reasonable, a more in-depth investigation is warranted to ensure all potential windstorm damages are identified and claimed, even if it delays the settlement process. Option D. Inform the client that the insurance company's assessment is usually accurate for windstorm claims and recommend they accept the offer to avoid unnecessary complications. Correct answer is C. Advise the client that, while the initial offer seems reasonable, a more in-depth investigation is warranted to ensure all potential windstorm damages are identified and claimed, even if it delays the settlement process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits the public adjuster's duty to their client against the potential for a quicker, albeit less thorough, resolution that might benefit the insurance company. The public adjuster's primary ethical and regulatory obligation is to represent the policyholder's best interests, ensuring a fair and accurate settlement based on the policy's terms and the actual damages sustained. Navigating this situation requires a commitment to professional integrity and adherence to regulatory standards that govern public adjusters. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting all windstorm damages, obtaining independent estimates, and thoroughly reviewing the policy to identify all covered losses. This approach upholds the public adjuster's fiduciary duty to the client by advocating for a settlement that fully compensates for the damages, as stipulated by the insurance contract. Regulatory frameworks for public adjusters typically mandate acting with honesty, integrity, and in the best interest of the insured. This includes a thorough investigation and presentation of the claim, rather than accepting a superficial assessment. An incorrect approach would be to accept the insurance company's initial offer without independent verification, even if it seems expedient. This fails to meet the professional obligation to the policyholder, potentially leaving them undercompensated. Ethically, this constitutes a breach of trust and a failure to act in the client's best interest. Regulatory failure occurs because public adjusters are expected to be advocates for the insured, not merely conduits for the insurer's initial assessment. Another incorrect approach is to pressure the policyholder into accepting a settlement quickly to close the file, even if the policyholder expresses reservations or if further investigation might uncover additional damages. This prioritizes the adjuster's efficiency over the client's rightful compensation and violates the principle of informed consent. It also risks violating regulations that require adjusters to provide clear and accurate information to their clients. A third incorrect approach would be to downplay or ignore certain types of windstorm damage that are more complex to assess or prove in order to expedite the claim. This is a direct violation of the duty to represent the policyholder fully and accurately. It undermines the purpose of hiring a public adjuster, which is to ensure all covered losses are identified and claimed. Such an action could lead to regulatory sanctions for misrepresentation or failure to perform duties diligently. The professional decision-making process in such situation should involve a clear understanding of the policyholder's rights and the adjuster's obligation. It requires prioritizing thoroughness and accuracy over speed, maintaining open communication with the client, and always acting with integrity. When faced with pressure for a quick settlement, a professional should reaffirm their commitment to a comprehensive claim evaluation and explain to the client why further investigation is necessary to ensure a fair outcome. Question 18. The control framework reveals that a public adjuster is reviewing a claim for water damage to a commercial building. The policyholder believes the damage is fully covered. The adjuster has identified that the policy lists specific causes of water damage that are covered, such as burst pipes and roof leaks, but does not explicitly state that all other causes of water damage are covered. What type of property insurance policy is most likely in effect, and what is the primary implication for the adjuster's approach to this claim? Option A. The policy is likely an all-risk open perils policy, meaning all causes of water damage are covered unless specifically excluded. Option B. The policy is likely a broad form policy which automatically covers all types of water damage. Option C. The policy is likely a special form policy which covers all damages regardless of the cause. Option D. The policy is likely a named perils policy, requiring the adjuster to verify that the specific cause of the water damage is among those listed as covered. The correct answer is D. The policy is likely a named perils policy, requiring the adjuster to verify that the specific cause of the water damage is among those listed as covered. Explanation. The control framework reveals that a public adjuster's primary duty is to represent the policyholder's best interests, adhering strictly to the terms of the insurance policy and applicable state regulations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the adjuster to navigate the nuances of different policy types and their coverage implications without misrepresenting or misinterpreting policy language, which could lead to underpayment or denial of a valid claim. Careful judgment is required to accurately identify the policy type and its associated coverage limitations and benefits. The correct approach involves meticulously reviewing the policy documents to determine if the property is insured under a named perils policy or an all-risk, open perils policy. This is the best professional practice because it directly addresses the core of the claim's coverage based on the foundational structure of the insurance contract. A named perils policy only covers losses caused by the specific perils listed in the policy, while an all-risk policy covers all perils except those specifically excluded. Accurately identifying this distinction is paramount for advising the policyholder on the scope of their coverage and for preparing a claim that aligns with the policy's provisions. This aligns with regulatory requirements that mandate adjusters to act with honesty, integrity, and competence, ensuring policyholders receive the benefits to which they are entitled under their contract. An incorrect approach would be to assume coverage based on the general nature of the damage, without first confirming the specific perils covered by the policy. This fails to acknowledge the fundamental difference between named perils and all-risk policies, and could lead to the policyholder being misled about their coverage. This constitutes a regulatory failure, as it violates the duty of competence and honesty owed to the client. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the estimated cost of repairs without first establishing policy coverage. While cost estimation is a crucial part of the claims process, it is secondary to determining whether the loss is covered by the policy in the first place. Proceeding with cost estimation without confirming coverage is a premature action that could result in wasted effort and misaligned expectations for the policyholder, representing a failure in professional judgment and potentially violating ethical guidelines regarding efficient and accurate claims handling. A further incorrect approach would be to advise the policyholder that all property damage is covered regardless of the policy type. This is a gross misrepresentation of insurance principles and a direct violation of regulatory mandates that require adjusters to accurately interpret and apply policy terms. Such advice would be unethical and could lead to significant legal and financial repercussions for both the policyholder and the adjuster. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough review of the insurance policy to understand its terms, conditions, exclusions, and endorsements. This foundational step ensures that all subsequent actions, such as damage assessment and claim preparation, are grounded in accurate policy interpretation. The adjuster must then communicate clearly and honestly with the policyholder about the scope of their coverage, managing expectations and guiding them through the claims process with integrity and expertise. Question 19. Compliance review shows that a certified professional public adjuster, CPPA, has been engaged to represent an insured in a property damage claim in a state where their license has recently expired, and the renewal application is still pending review by the state's Department of Insurance. The adjuster has not yet performed any substantive adjustment work on this specific claim, but has had initial client consultations. What is the most appropriate course of action for the public adjuster to take immediately? Option A. Advise the insured to seek representation from a licensed public adjuster in that state while the renewal is pending, but continue to offer informal advice and guidance to the insured. Option B. Proceed with the adjustment, but only perform administrative tasks and client communication, deferring all technical assessment and negotiation until the license is renewed. Option C. Continue with the claim adjustment process, informing the insured that the license renewal is pending and that work will proceed with the understanding that it may need to be re-verified later. Option D. Immediately cease all further engagement with the insured on this claim until confirmation is received that the license has been renewed and is active in that jurisdiction. The correct answer is C. Continue with the claim adjustment process, informing the insured that the license renewal is pending and that work will proceed with the understanding that it may need to be re-verified later. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the public adjuster to navigate a situation where their actions, while seemingly beneficial to the insured, could inadvertently lead to regulatory noncompliance. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the duty to advocate for the insured with the absolute requirement to adhere to licensing and regulatory frameworks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the pursuit of a favorable outcome for the client does not cross legal or ethical boundaries. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and addressing the licensing discrepancy, before undertaking any adjustment activities. This demonstrates a commitment to operating within the established regulatory framework, which is paramount for maintaining professional integrity and avoiding legal repercussions. Specifically, the public adjuster must verify their license status in the relevant jurisdiction, and if found to be unlicensed or with an expired license, cease all adjustment activities until proper licensure is obtained. This aligns with the fundamental regulatory requirement that only licensed individuals may engage in public adjusting activities. This proactive stance protects both the insured and the public adjuster from potential penalties, such as fines, license suspension, or revocation, and upholds the integrity of the profession. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the adjustment assuming the license is valid or will be renewed in time. This ignores the explicit regulatory requirement for active licensure and places the public adjuster in a position of operating illegally. The failure here is a direct violation of licensing statutes, which typically mandate that a license must be current and in good standing to perform regulated activities. Another incorrect approach would be to delegate the adjustment work to a colleague who is licensed in that jurisdiction, while the public adjuster's license is in question. While this might seem like a way to keep the claim moving, it still represents an attempt to circumvent the licensing requirements for the public adjuster themselves. The public adjuster is still ultimately responsible for the oversight and management of the claim, and engaging in such a practice could be viewed as acting as an unlicensed public adjuster through a proxy, which is a violation of the spirit and letter of licensing laws. A further incorrect approach would be to attempt to expedite the license renewal process by making informal arrangements with the regulatory body without following the prescribed procedures. Regulatory bodies operate under strict procedural rules, and attempting to bypass these can lead to further complications and may be seen as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage or to mislead the regulator. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should always begin with a thorough understanding and verification of one's own licensing status in every jurisdiction where business is conducted. Before accepting any new assignment or continuing with an ongoing one, a public adjuster must confirm that their license is active, current, and in good standing. If any doubt exists, the prudent course of action is to pause all work related to that jurisdiction until the licensing status is definitively confirmed and rectified. This commitment to regulatory compliance forms the bedrock of professional practice and safeguards against significant legal and ethical breaches. Question 20. The assessment process reveals significant water damage to a commercial property following a burst pipe. The insured, eager to resume business operations, requests immediate commencement of extensive repairs, including cosmetic upgrades, beyond the scope of restoring the property to its pre-loss condition. Public adjuster has a preliminary estimate from a contractor, but has not yet submitted a formal proof of loss or received insurer approval for the repair scope. What is the most appropriate course of action for the public adjuster in this situation, adhering strictly to the principles of property insurance and regulatory guidelines for a certified professional public adjuster? Option A. Recommend that the insured proceed with the cosmetic upgrades as requested by the insured, arguing that such improvements are necessary to maintain the property's market value and will be considered part of the overall claim. Option B. Advise the insured to accept the contractor's preliminary estimate as the final cost and instruct the contractor to begin repairs immediately, assuming the insurer will reimburse based on this initial figure. Option C. Advise the insured that repairs can commence immediately as requested, as the priority is business interruption mitigation, and the insurer will likely approve the costs later. Option D. Inform the insured about the policy's requirements for insurer inspection and approval of repairs, and proceed with documenting all damage, obtaining detailed estimates, and submitting a comprehensive claim package to the insurer for review and approval before any significant work begins. The correct answer is C. Advise the insured that repairs can commence immediately as requested, as the priority is business interruption mitigation, and the insurer will likely approve the costs later. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the public adjuster must balance the insured's desire for immediate repairs with the insurer's right to a thorough investigation and the policy's contractual obligations. The adjuster's duty is to represent the insured's best interests while adhering to the principles of property insurance and regulatory requirements. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting the policy's provisions regarding the scope of covered damage and the process for approving repairs, ensuring that any recommended actions are both justifiable under the policy and compliant with industry standards. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting all damage, obtaining detailed estimates from qualified contractors, and presenting a comprehensive claim package to the insurer that clearly delineates the scope of covered losses and the necessity of the proposed repairs. This approach aligns with the principle of indemnity, aiming to restore the insured to their pre-loss condition as defined by the policy. Regulatory frameworks for public adjusters typically mandate acting with honesty, integrity, and in the best interest of the client, which includes advocating for fair and accurate claim settlements based on policy terms and evidence. This methodical process ensures that the claim is supported by factual data and policy language, facilitating a fair resolution and avoiding potential disputes. An incorrect approach of immediately authorizing extensive, unverified repairs without insurer approval risks violating the policy's conditions. Many property insurance policies require the insurer to have an opportunity to inspect the damage before it is repaired or replaced, and to approve the scope and cost of repairs. Proceeding without this approval can lead to the insurer denying coverage for those specific repairs, arguing that the insured failed to comply with policy conditions. This failure to follow the established claims process is a significant regulatory and ethical breach, as it jeopardizes the insured's recovery and demonstrates a lack of diligence and adherence to contractual obligations. Another incorrect approach of accepting the insurer's initial lowball offer without thorough investigation and documentation is also professionally unacceptable. This fails the public adjuster's fundamental duty to advocate for the insured's full and fair entitlement under the policy. It suggests a lack of expertise in assessing property damage and negotiating claims, and potentially a conflict of interest if the adjuster is not acting in the client's best interest. This approach neglects the principle of indemnity and can result in the insured being undercompensated for their loss, a direct violation of the public adjuster's ethical and professional responsibilities. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the policy terms, a thorough assessment of the physical damage, engagement with qualified professionals for repair estimates, and clear, evidence-based communication with the insurer. The public adjuster must act as a knowledgeable intermediary, ensuring that all parties understand their rights and obligations under the policy and relevant regulations. This involves prioritizing factual evidence and policy interpretation over expediency or pressure from either the insured or the insurer.